Hello, and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video, we're going to start looking at Magic 2010, the first sort of brand new core set. So we're going to dive in and start looking at that. We're going to look at We Are Legion, which is white-red. Yes, because the intro packs now are for core sets are now multicolored, which is really interesting. Previously, they've only been monocolor, like we saw in 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. They were all monocolor, so now they're starting to splash slightly into two-color decks. And I think I'm just going to talk about it now, so I don't talk about it on every video. I think this is a really good decision to make because, say, the core set is targeted at brand new players. So I think having a deck that is two colors, it does show off that, like, oh hey, like, you don't have to commit to a single color. It is possible to have a deck be more than one color, and I know that seems obviously to people who've been playing the game for, like, I don't know, more than a week maybe. But when you're brand new, Magic is a game with a lot of information in it, and just introducing this kind of idea very gently that yep, you can have a deck be more than one color. It's fine, and teach about kind of land ratios. I think that's really good. Anyway, so yeah, let's start looking at We Are Legion. So Magic 2010 was, honestly, it was really exciting because it was. It was, we had 10th edition. 10th edition was an okay core set, I think. It's honestly, it's pretty good in terms of traditional core sets, but it was all reprints. Magic 2010 introduced brand new cards, and it was the first core set to actually do that, because up to now, core sets had always just been reprints from previous sets. So this is the first time we were getting brand new cards, so it made it feel fresh and exciting and new, and so much so that my group and I, at the time we went out, we bought a display box, like a big booster box, and we did a couple of games of draft with M10. It was super good fun. There's a lot of other background stuff with Magic 2010. So we've had terminology changes. So now Exile and Battlefield are now permanently in the lexicon. So instead of like comes into play, it's now enters the battlefield. Instead of removed from game, we now have Exile, and that's wording that obviously we still have today. We're very familiar with it. And there's also like rules changes. The big two are getting rid of mana burn, which I think is excellent, because I think mana burn was always kind of a bit of a silly rule, honestly. And removing damage on the stack, which I know a lot of veteran players still bemoan to this day. They're like, oh, they took away damage on the stack. That was such a good rule, and it makes creatures worse because you can't put damage on the stack and then also use them for their ability or sacrifice them, whatever. But it was more about streamlining the game, making it more accessible, and I think that ultimately is a good thing, rather than having the weird case of putting damage on the stack and still being able to do stuff, because that's kind of the thing. If you do it against an inexperienced player, you do it, they're not aware of the interaction, and then you have to explain it, and it sort of feels like cheating a little bit, when you exploit like this kind of rule that a newer player maybe doesn't know. And that's kind of something I'm experiencing at the moment when I go to my local game shop on Friday nights, because there's quite a lot of few new players there. So when I do stuff, or when their cards don't work maybe as they thought they did, and I have to kind of explain rules to them, it probably doesn't feel great for them. Obviously it's a learning experience, but anyway, I am rambling so much. Let's talk about these cards. So, the foil face red deck is Light Wielder Paladin, and this is honestly a bit of a weird choice for a rare. So 3 and 2 white for a 4/4 with first strike, which is pretty good stats. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can exile a black or red permanent that player controls. Which is, so in some regards, this is good as an introductory product rare, because it shows that, like, oh hey, the colors, some colors don't like the other colors, like white doesn't really like red or black. And so there's going to be that, you make a new player aware of those kind of interactions. The thing is, though, like, if you play this, I mean, it's still a 4/4 first strike, but it's weird to put excuse me, it's weird to put a card that has a specific interaction with another color, which could be a niche interaction. If you play against a deck that's blue and green, this effect isn't going to go off. So it's a bit weird. So I can this is kind of like a sideboard card, I suppose. It still works as a 4/4 first strike, I suppose, for 5. But you're not getting the full effect. But overall, I think it's okay, but it's still a bit of a weird choice, and I think there was a better choice, which I'll discuss later. So we have a single elite vanguard, just 1 white mana for a 2/1. So kind of like functional reprint of Savannah Lines, and this got a lot of people really interested. Seeing a 1 mana 2/1 with no drawback. And I think this was like one of the main previews of M10. I seem to remember like it generating a lot of buzz, being like, "Oh my god, Savannah Lions is back!" And it was really exciting. And like obviously now like a 1 mana 2/1 is nothing to get excited about, but back then, back in the heady days of 2009, this was a big deal. And Sarah Angel, who's now been downshifted to uncommon, which I feel is right, because she's very very strong card, I think, or well decently strong, iconic as well. I think making her uncommon is the right call. I think she's too weak to be a rare, personally, especially at the time, at the time of M10 it being reprinted. So Sarah Angel, 3 double white 4/4 flying visions, absolute classic, great art. I love Sarah Angel, amazing card. Moving on. So we have a single Undead Slayer. And I remember this was a preview card as well because it was showing off the exile wording. So 2 and a white for a 2/2. You can pay 1 white and tap to exile a skeleton, vampire, or zombie. It being in a core set. With kind of like these iconic fantasy cards. So black had a lot of skeletons, vampires, and zombies in it in M10. So this actually would have been pretty useful. Again, maybe a bit of a niche pick for an introductory product. But I could also, you could make an argument for it like, oh, it sort of teaches newer players that, hey, that creature type, that line of text, that does matter sometimes. There will be effects that care about creature types. So possibly you can make the argument for that. I don't think this has ever been reprinted, which is a shame. This would have been great to get a reprint in like an Innistrad set. It would have been an absolute house then, I think. But yeah, obviously against the right kind of deck, this would be super, super strong. We actually have got vampires coming up in Zendikar, so this is kind of like a little bit of foreshadowing, maybe. Single Palace Guard, 2 and a white, 1/4, can block any number of creatures. Yep, this is perfectly fine, I think. I love effects like this where it can just multi-block as many things as possible. It's just these 2 soldiers block 99 creatures. It's amazing. I think it's a perfectly fine card again to have in a core set. Single Griffin Sentinel, 3 mana for a 1/3 flying vigilance. Yep, perfectly fine. 2 Razorfoot Griffin, absolute core set staple. So it wasn't all brand new cards in M10. There were some reprints. But I would say probably about a 50-50 mix of reprints and brand new cards, I think, which is, feels about right. Because, even for like more experienced players, like, it's nice to see some familiar faces, rather than just have a whole brand new card pool to work with. It's fine to have, I say, some familiar faces. So Razorfoot Griffin is a core set star, 4 mana, 2/2 flying first strike. Yep, this again perfectly fine as a common. Single Soul Warden, great to have Soul Warden in M10. 1 white mana for a 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Yep, absolutely perfect. Great card to include, I think, in the deck. Single Stormfront Pegasus, 2 mana for a 2/1 flyer. So technically a new card, but it's actually, I think, it's a functional reprint of Mistral Charger from Ravnica, which was weird. It was this exact card. It was a 2/1 flying Pegasus, but it was uncommon for some insane reason. But yeah, this is again like perfectly fine. 2 mana for a 2/1 flyer is pretty aggressively costed. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing what the theme of the deck is obviously to play cheap creatures. It's White Weenie, Silvercoat Lion. Now this is not great in my opinion. So 2 mana for a 2/2, with no abilities, which is even at this time in the game, this is white can do better than this. Like we've had definitely previous cards, especially I think at common as well, that were 2 mana 2/2s with abilities. Like this could have had an activated ability. So this felt. I mean, I suppose you could say it's simple because it's a core set, so make it a vanilla creature. But this feels disappointing to get in a deck as well. I don't know. But again, you could say this is an easy card that a new player can identify as not being too good, so they would remove it. So I suppose it helps deck building decisions. You could make that. I mean, it's still a 2/2 for 2. It's still a bear. It's not dreadful. It's still serviceable, but just a little disappointing because white can do better than this. So the other rare is Honor of the Pure. So 1 cost 1 white, enchantment, white creatures you control get +1/+1. Yep. So 1 cheaper than Glorious Anthem, but only affects white creatures, which is, again, in this deck, absolutely fine. The vast majority of the creatures are white. So yeah, this I think is a pretty good rare. And I've sort of said a similar thing in previous core set things, like where Glorious Anthem has been a rare. It's just a very simple effect that a new player can understand and be impressed by. Like, well, all my stuff is now permanently stronger. Like, yep, this just stays out and just keeps buffing up your creatures. So yeah, just it's a good learning experience, I think. Single Armored Ascension, 3 and a white. Aura goes on a creature and it gives enchanted creature +1/+1 and flying. +X/+X for every planes you control and has flying. So yeah, this is like a nice reprint from Shadowmoor. Yes, Shadowmoor. Yeah, and you would just put this on a creature, and that's kind of like turns it into a win condition, really. So yeah, I think again, perfectly good card to include. 2 pacifism, Grax back. We all know pacifism. Yeah, it just goes on a creature, locks it down. Yep, perfectly fine. At time of recording, I'm really sad that pacifism actually. I'm not sad. Maybe sad's probably too strong a word. But this has been obsolete now by one of the previews I've seen in Phyrexia or Obi-Wan. Because as of recording, like we're still sort of in preview season for that. And it's pacifism, but it can also go on planeswalkers, and it stops planeswalkers from using their abilities, and it's exactly the same cost. So sad that pacifism has finally had its day. Single Divine Verdict. So this is a new card. So 3 and a white. It is a functional reprint though of Neck Snap, which I think from Lorwyn, which was always like a weird card name. And concept for a white card, really. I thought it always felt more like a black card. But yeah, it just destroys an attacking or blocking creature, like perfectly fine effect. Maybe, I mean, you could argue maybe a tiny bit expensive at 4 mana, but it has no restrictions like on color or power or mana value or anything. So yeah, I think 4 mana for that is perfectly fine. And again, does a good job of showing new players that like, yep, white can kill stuff. It's not all life gain and sunshine. It will straight up murder a guy, but it has to be at a specific time. Which I think is, so again, it teaches a new player like what each colour does. I think these decks will do a good job of it. Single Righteousness, which has finally been downshifted on common, which is where I think it belongs. 1 white mana just to make a blocking creature super buff until end of turn. Righteousness is really strong, but it's not rare worthy like it has been in previous sets. So this was a much welcome downshift. Single Glorious Charge, just 2 mana to give all your creatures +1/+1 turn turn. Yep, perfectly fine. Board wide buff, you're going wide, I think. So this is, fine card to include. Harm's Way, this is an interesting, I don't think it's been reprinted actually, Harm's Way. So 1 white mana, the next 2 damage that a source of your choice would deal to you or opponent you control this turn is instead dealt to another target creature or player. So you just bounce 2 damage off yourself or one of your things onto someone else, which is, that's pretty go for like 1 white mana. I think that's okay. Sort of like you got to jump through some hoops really. It's to make it into a burn spell. But yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. Just have a single one here. It's a little more complex, I think, for a new player to understand. But when you explain, it's like, oh yeah, you just bounce damage off. Then like they understand it. You just got to like decipher the magic keys kind of writing. But yeah, I think it's a fine card. And it's weird that it's not been reprinted because this feels like I feel like these days this would be a common and just like a decent sort of combat trick, I suppose. So there is some red in here as well. So they are all dual colored, these M10 decks, but it is very heavily weighted towards like the main color, and then the secondary color is literally I think only 3 cards per color. So it is literally just a splash of it. Which it's still fine. It still shows that you can have a two color deck and it doesn't have to be equal. Equal distribution of the colours. You can just have a splash of things if needs be. I think that's okay. So there's one card that we're going to definitely talk about. So we have Prodigal Pyromancer. Let's talk about him first. It's just red Prodigal Sorcerer. The colour it should always be. Yep, just 3 mana, 1/1, taps 2 and damage to creature or player. Perfectly fine. Lava Axe, 5 mana, sorcery, does 5 damage to target player. Yes, this has always been okay. Just a little kind of boring, but it's fine. So Lightning Bolt. So this was the other, I think, one of the other big previews for M10 that they were bringing Lightning Bolt back, and like again, people got really excited about this. Like I know I did, because for ages we were making do with stuff like Incinerate, and Incinerate's not bad, or like Shock. We were making do with Shock or stuff like I don't know, Rift Bolt, stuff like, all these kind of things that were sort of Lightning Bolt. They were trying to be Lightning Bolt, but they weren't quite there. And then they were just like, oh yeah, Lightning Bolt's coming back. And I'm almost certain it was a marketing thing to get people interested in buying M10. It worked because I really wanted Lightning Bolts again. So yeah, 1 red mana instant does 3 damage to target creature or player. This is like the absolute benchmark of like classic red burn. It's very, very difficult to get a red burn spell that's like as efficient as Lightning Bolt. Just 1 red mana for 3 damage to anything is super, super good. Yeah, so really, really happy that Lightning Bolt came back in M10. I think that's part of the reason why we were so excited about playing it. I think in the draft we did, someone opened up 2 of them, so had like a pretty decent burn deck. Yeah, it was great. Single Terramorphic Expanse, and then 5 mountains, 12 plains. So yeah, it's all pretty good. Pretty good mana base. Like the mana base is, I think this is identical for all the M10 decks. Like 1 Terramorphic Expanse to show off that land searching is important, I suppose, and then 5 land of like the secondary color and 12 of the main, which I think is fine. We're still at 41 cards, and we will be for all these M10 decks, and then all through Zendikar. But it is what it is. For an introductory product, I don't mind as much than being 41 cards. So, what could have been? I've changed my layout for a little bit of this. Like in the previous videos, it only be 1 card at a time. I thought, let's just do 3 at once, because then we can get through them quicker. So I do think the card selection here is okay. Like, I don't think there's anything bad, because overall I thought M10 was like a fairly solid card pool. There are a few duff cards. Acolyte of Zathrid jumps out of my mind. That was just a super bad card. But yeah, on the whole, it felt, because I think there were brand new cards designed for a new set. Just the card pool felt really good. But what could we have had? We could have had Blinding Mage, which is the new Master Decoy. So move over Master Decoy. There's a new tap down creature in town. It's Blinding Mage. Holy Strength I thought could be okay, but you got Armored Ascension, so it's not necessary. Safe Passage I think would have been good in here as well, just to show off new players. Like, oh hey, white prevents damage. And Safe Passage is really, really good. It's like it's one-sided fog. Which is really good, I think. And I'm not sure how many times it's been reprinted, but this seems like such a just good spell to me. But I suppose that's the casual player in me coming out. We could have also had White Knight. This would have been a nice, fun reprint to have. I mean, it is again a kind of a niche product. It only has protection from black, and again, you have 2 new players. Maybe pick up this one and say, I know, the green one, or one that doesn't have black in it, and play them, and then you're like, oh well, my card's not really doing anything. It has protection from black, but you're not playing black, so it's not so great. But I don't know, it could have been in here, maybe. Trumpet Blast, you're going wide, so this would have been okay, I think, to buff up your creatures. Now, let's talk. So, Rock's Pike Master. So 4 mana for 3/3 with First Strike, which is like pretty good cost anyway, and gives all your other soldiers First Strike. So M10 had a bit of a sub-theme of Soldier Tribal. So this, we've seen quite a few creatures in here have been soldiers. Maybe not as many as there could be, but a few. But yeah, so I think what would have been interesting if this deck had just gone really like double down on the soldier tribal. I think that would have been interesting. So Rock's Pike Master, I think, could have been, you could have just had one of them. Captain of the Watch as the rare instead of the Light Wielder Paladin, because Captain of the Watch is an absolute bomb. So 6 mana for 3/3 with Vigilance, gives your other soldiers +1/+1 Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, you make 3 1/1 white soldiers. So for 6 mana, you are making what? You're making 9 power worth of stuff, which is really, really good. Captain of the Watch is great. I remember this being like quite a really popular card to try and get a hold of for a really long time. It just does so much. I would have loved this if this had been like the face foil rare. That would have been great. But yeah, and then you could have also had, if you were then doubling down on the soldiers, you could have Veteran Swordsmith, who gives you soldiers +1/+0, and you could have Veteran Armsmith, who gives you soldiers +0/+1. So that's a direction it could have gone in, but then I don't know if it would have been like too strong and competitive compared to the other 4 to have like this really good soldier theme. It probably got suggested like in the handout that comes with the deck. Like, oh, by the way, this set is full of soldiers. You should get more soldiers. I don't know. But overall, I think this is like a really good introductory deck. Honestly, I think it's really classic, embodies like what M10 was all about. There, it was all very exciting, and I've really enjoyed like actually looking at this one, talking about this one. I'm gonna enjoy talking about all the 2010 ones, which is good because Alara honestly was fine, but I found it difficult to really say anything about those, just because I don't know. But anyway, I think this one is pretty good, and I would have been really happy to get this one. Did I have this one? I can't remember. I might have bought it. I do have a light wielder paladin, and again, why would I? Can't remember why. I don't know why I would have that, and yeah, I wouldn't have bought it singly. So I must have got this at some point, but I probably didn't play it straight out of the box. I probably would have just disassembled it immediately. But what are your thoughts on the deck? You know, if you got any stories or comments or thoughts about this deck, put a comment below. Always like that. If you got any, stories about M10 in general, and what your thoughts on the set were, and the kind of the rules changes and the terminology changes, yep, put a comment below. Always like that. But next time I will look at another 2010 core set intro pack. But until then, thank you for watching and listening. Have a great day.